Hello there, lovely people, it's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today it is finally time to review Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. This review was originally written by me, and has been adapted for video by me. That's a rarity. But anyway, enough waffling, let's dive right into things. Platformers as a genre aren't quite what they once were. Whether they're 3D or 2D, we've had a little bit of a mini renaissance with them in recent years, but they hold nowhere near the draw they did in the 80s and the 90s. What a shame then that one of the best and most polished games of the genre happens to not only launch after these golden years, but on a console that, for the most part, passed a lot of people by. In case it wasn't already obvious enough given the title, we are of course referring to Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. It made a splash with a handful of people who bought a Wii U, but it received nowhere near the commercial success that it deserved. Blasting back onto Switch, is it finally time for this game to shine, or have the years been too cruel? It's the former, let's not even try to pretend. As stated in our review of the Wii U version, Tropical Freeze takes everything that makes Donkey Kong Country Returns great and doubles down on it. The running, jumping, and rolling that made the original game so enjoyable has been refined further and tightened to the nth degree. The higher resolution of the more modern games also plays dividends in allowing you to see more of the level from afar, meaning you can react more appropriately when pits or enemies lie ahead of you. The Wii U version of this game was only able to display at 720p, but it still looked great. This new version, however, boosts it up to a gorgeous 1080p that fits the art style and aesthetic so well that we didn't even notice at first. It's a real testament to the art direction. Other changes are fairly minimal, as shown in Digital Foundry's recent video comparison that you should check out by clicking that card up there. Shading appears to be marginally different, and DK's fur is a bit nicer to gawp at, but overall the biggest change is absolutely the resolution, as previously stated. The frame rate remains the same solid 60 frames a second as well, which has proven absolutely unshakable regardless of what's going on screen. For a hardcore platformer like this, that stability is essential, and they've completely nailed it. Speaking of hardcore, let's address the gorilla in the room. The biggest new addition to this version of the game is that of Funky Kong, the bodacious ape that's totally tubular or mondo or whatever. When you start a save file for the first time, you'll be asked whether you want to play the game in original mode or funky mode. The former is the game just as it was on the Wii U, with absolutely nothing changed beyond the previously mentioned resolution and fur and stuff. The latter, funky mode, however, is a totally new Hang 10 way to play, noticeably reducing the difficulty thanks to Funky Kong's shiny new moveset. He behaves much like DK, only he can roll forever, just as though he had a partner Kong with him at all times, although when playing as Funky you can never use a partner Kong. He can also double jump, slow his descent by using his surfboard as a makeshift helicopter, obviously, and also stand stationary on spiked floors without taking damage. You'll also have 5 hearts to play with rather than the standard Kong default of 2 each, allowing you to take a lot more punishment before returning to your last checkpoint. You'll not be locked into this new way to tackle the game's challenges, however, as at any time you can switch to playing as good old Donkey Kong should you wish, provided of course you're not in the middle of a level. You'll also get a smidgen more health than if you were playing in original mode, so it's not heading directly from one extreme to the other. Whichever mode you choose to play, that decision is permanent, so make sure you're absolutely certain what kind of challenge you're after. Of course, there's nothing to stop you from starting a new save file in the other mode as well. Whilst some of the more seasoned players may be put off by the idea of taking the sting out of the game's difficulty, it really is a superb addition. The fact that save files are locked in either mode means that no matter how tempted you are, you can't quickly beat a level as Funky Kong before reverting back unless you've specifically selected funky mode. If you're committed to playing it in its original form, you lock yourself into that decision, and the game offers no relief at any time. If you want a challenge, it's still here, and it's still chuffing hard. For less experienced players, this is an absolute godsend. What was once a bright and colourful yet deceivingly devilish platformer is now much more accessible to those new to the Donkey Kong Country formula. That's not to say that funky mode is straight up easy though. We still found our time with Funky seriously unforgiving at times. It's certainly easier than it is with DK, but it's by no means something you can blitz through without taking a hit. Enemies are exactly where they were before, pits are just as big, and Funky's new new moves aren't as overpowered as they may seem on paper. Despite having the ability to slow his descent to a crawl by holding the jump button, when you're doing so, your horizontal movement is cripplingly slow. Unless you're about to miss an edge by a very small margin, you'll probably still end up tumbling to your death, albeit gradually. Standing on spikes is all well and good as well, but it is just standing. You can't run or even walk, meaning you have to jump each time you want to move forward, which can put you in some troublesome situations if an enemy is approaching you. Being able to roll forever also has its drawbacks, as it's not easy to come to a stop when doing so, and on several occasions we've blasted ourselves into spear-wielding foes before we can stop ourselves. So, can all this hardship, even in funky mode, be worth it? Absolutely. The difficulty balance is borderline perfect. Levels are tough, but each time you die, you're painfully aware that it's your fault and you're the one who misread the situation or mistimed that jump. You know, we believe we only encountered one instance of what you could call a cheap moment when we didn't have enough time to react, and even then it was only a single hit from an enemy rather than an instant death. It was also during one of those infamously tricky K levels, which can only be unlocked by finding all the Kong letters in a world. If you've played the game before, you know what I'm talking about. The sense of accomplishment for finally completing a level you've been struggling with is undeniably wonderful, yet no single level is so frustrating that it made us quit out of anger. Every time you play, you'll progress a little bit further, you'll learn where you went wrong, and you'll improve for the next run. Again, we feel this is largely due to the almost total absence of cheap artificial difficulty spikes. Let's quickly round up by talking about the presentation. Simply, it's totally and utterly gorgeous, with every screen looking entirely original and unique and bursting with color, a soundtrack to make Mozart jealous, and animations smoother than butter. Everything is refined to a T, from the gameplay to the presentation. Yes, the rough charm presented in the rare titles is missing, but that's to be expected. Those games were created by a different team with different sensibilities, using much cruder technology. Tropical Freeze is a glorious refinement of Rare's approach, but we can see how some die-hard Donkey Kong Country fans might prefer the SNES originals, perhaps due to those rose-tinted spectacles. There's no doubt about it, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is one of the most refined and enjoyable platformers money can buy. The levels are all beautiful, not only because of their delightful new 1080p resolution, but also their structure. The characters move with fluidity and brilliant responsiveness, and the inclusion of Funky Kong brings balance for those who have less experience with brutally tough platformers. It's so well made that it's almost too well made. There's an absence of a certain rough and ready charm found in the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy. This is, however, a complaint so minor it's practically insignificant. Donkey Kong's first appearance on Switch is streamlined, rewarding, and immensely good fun. Any fan of 2D platformers simply has to get this game.